The bus dropped Elena Petrov at the edge of a small town she had never heard of before. She stood on the sidewalk with her old backpack hanging from her shoulders. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, but she felt cold inside. Everything she owned was in that backpack now. One change of clothes, a toothbrush, a photo of her father, and $30 in her wallet. 6 months ago, her life had been completely different. 6 months ago, she lived in a beautiful apartment in Manhattan, the kind of apartment that had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the kind of apartment where famous people came to visit. Her father, Viktor Petrov, was one of the most famous piano players in the world. People paid thousands of dollars to hear him play. He traveled to concert halls in Paris, London, Tokyo, and Vienna. And Elena had grown up surrounded by music, wealth, and admiration. She remembered the night everything changed. It was a cold February evening. Her father had just returned from a concert tour in Europe. He looked tired, more tired than usual. He went to bed early, saying he needed rest. Elena never saw him alive again. He died in his sleep that night. The doctors said it was his heart. It had simply stopped beating. The funeral was large and grand. Hundreds of people came, famous musicians, wealthy patrons of the arts, journalists. Everyone talked about what a genius Viktor Petrov had been. They told Elena how lucky she was to be his daughter, how proud she must be. But Elena just felt empty. Her mother had died when she was 7. Now her father was gone too. At 22 years old, she was alone in the world. Then the lawyers came, and the creditors. Men in expensive suits who sat in her living room and told her things that made no sense. They said her father owed money. A lot of money. They used words like debt and bankruptcy and assets. Elena didn't understand at first. How could her father owe money? He was famous. He made millions. But it turned out that Viktor Petrov had lived beyond his means for years. The expensive apartment was rented and the rent was months overdue. The beautiful furniture was bought on credit. The cars, the clothes, the jewelry, all bought with borrowed money. Even the grand piano that sat in their living room, the Steinway that her father had played every morning, belonged to the bank. The lawyers explained that there was no inheritance, no savings, no trust fund. Elena had believed she would go to Juilliard on money her father had set aside for her. But that money didn't exist. It had never existed. Her father had spent everything, always believing that the next concert, the next recording contract would solve all the problems. But it never did. Within a month, everything was taken away. The bank took the apartment. Creditors took the furniture, the piano, everything of value. Even her mother's jewelry, which Elena thought would be hers, was sold to pay debts. Elena was left with nothing except the clothes in her closet and a small amount of cash she had in her own bank account. She tried to reach out to her stepmother, a woman her father had married 3 years ago. But Maria made it clear she wanted nothing to do with Elena. Maria had left Viktor months before he died, and now she was living in California with a new husband. She didn't return Elena's calls.
She didn't offer any help.
Elena thought about calling her father's friends, the wealthy people who had come to their apartment for dinner parties, the musicians who had played with him. Surely someone would help her, but pride stopped her. She couldn't bear the thought of them looking at her with pity. She couldn't bear becoming an object of charity for people who had admired her family's wealth and success. So she made a decision. She would leave New York. She would go somewhere new, somewhere nobody knew the name Petrov. She would start over. She sold what little she had left and bought an old Honda from a man who advertised it online. The car was 15 years old and had rust on the doors, but it ran. That was all she needed. She drove north, then east, following small roads and staying in cheap motels. She didn't have a destination in mind. She just wanted to get away from the city, from the memories, from the shame. After 3 days of driving, she ended up in Bellport, a small coastal town she had never heard of. It looked quiet and peaceful, the kind of place where nobody would know her or her father. Elena found a room in a boarding house run by an old woman who asked for payment in advance. She paid for 2 weeks. Then she started looking for work. She went to restaurants, shops, and offices, filling out applications. But everywhere she went, the result was the same. They would look at her resume and frown. Piano teacher, private music tutor, concert performer. These things meant nothing in a small town. Nobody needed a piano teacher here. Nobody cared that she had studied at a prestigious music school in Manhattan. Days turned into weeks. Her money ran out faster than she expected. The boarding house wanted another 2 weeks' rent, but Elena couldn't pay. The old woman told her she had to leave. Elena packed her backpack, got in her car, and drove away. She had nowhere to go now. The Honda became her home. She parked in different places each night, sometimes in the parking lot of a supermarket, sometimes near the harbor, sometimes on quiet residential streets where nobody would notice her. She learned to wash in public restrooms. She learned to make one meal last 2 days. She learned what it felt like to be truly hungry. At night, lying in the back seat of her car with her backpack as a pillow, Elena would think about her old life. She remembered sitting at the beautiful grand piano in their apartment, practicing for hours while her father listened and gave her advice. She remembered the applause at her first recital. She remembered her father's proud smile. All of that seemed like a dream now, a dream that belonged to someone else. She tried not to cry, but sometimes the tears came anyway. She would press her face into her backpack so nobody could hear her. She wondered how she had ended up here. How had the daughter of Viktor Petrov, the famous pianist, ended up sleeping in a car and going hungry? How had everything fallen apart so completely? But crying didn't help. Tears didn't pay for food or shelter. So Elena would wipe her eyes, take a deep breath, and tell herself that tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow she would find a job. Tomorrow things would change. She had to believe that, or she would give up completely. 3 weeks had passed since she arrived in Belport. 3 weeks of rejection, hunger, and loneliness. But Elena Petrov was her father's daughter, and if there was one thing Viktor Petrov had taught her, it was that a true musician never gives up. No matter how difficult the performance, you play until the final note. So Elena kept going day after day, waiting for her chance to play again. Elena woke up in her car with a stiff neck and an empty stomach. The morning sun was already bright, shining through the dirty windows of the Honda. She sat up slowly, feeling every ache in her body. Sleeping in a car was never comfortable, but after 3 weeks she had learned to curl up in ways that made it bearable. Barely. She checked her wallet. $10 left. That was all. $10 to last until she found work. And she had been looking for work every single day with no luck. The situation was getting desperate. Elena got out of the car and stretched. She was parked near the harbor again, in a public parking lot where tourists usually came. But it was still early, so the lot was empty. She walked to the public restroom near the beach. It was cold and smelled bad, but at least it had running water. She washed her face and brushed her teeth. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror above the sink. The woman looking back at her was a stranger. Her hair was unwashed and tangled. Dark circles sat under her eyes. Her clothes were wrinkled and dirty. She looked exactly like what she was, a homeless person. No wonder nobody wanted to hire her. She barely recognized herself anymore. Elena walked back to her car. She had eaten half a sandwich yesterday, saving the other half for today. But when she opened the paper bag where she had left it, she found the sandwich covered in mold. The summer heat had ruined it. She threw it in the trash, fighting back tears. That sandwich was supposed to be breakfast. Now she had nothing. She thought about spending her last $10 on food, but she also needed gas for the car. If the car stopped running, she would have nowhere to sleep at all. She had to make a choice: gas or food, shelter or survival. It was impossible. Elena decided to walk around town instead of driving. Maybe walking would distract her from the hunger. She passed by shops and restaurants, watching normal people live normal lives. They bought coffee. They laughed with friends. They didn't know what it felt like to have nothing. She felt invisible, like a ghost watching the world through glass. As the day went on, the hunger got worse. Her stomach hurt. Her head felt light and dizzy. She hadn't eaten anything since yesterday morning. She needed food soon, but how? She had already visited the food bank twice, and they told her she could only come once a week. That had been 4 days ago. She still had 3 more days to wait. Elena found herself walking toward the nicer part of town, the part where wealthy people lived in big houses with perfect gardens, the part where expensive cars filled the driveways. She told herself she was just walking, just passing through, but deep down she knew why she was there. This was where the nice restaurants were. The sun was starting to set when she saw it. A beautiful restaurant right on the waterfront. Large windows looked out over the harbor. Expensive cars filled the parking lot. Well-dressed people walked in through the front door. Elena stopped on the sidewalk and watched. The sign above the door said "The Maestro" in elegant gold letters. Through the windows, she could see white tablecloths and crystal glasses. Waiters in black vests moved between tables carrying plates of food. And there, in the corner of the dining room, sat a grand piano. Elena stared at the piano. It was beautiful. Black and shiny, like the one her father used to own. Nobody was playing it. It just sat there, silent and unused, while people ate their expensive meals. She wondered why they had a piano if nobody played it. What a waste. Her stomach growled loudly. The smell of food drifted out every time the door opened. Grilled fish. Fresh bread. Something sweet and buttery. Elena felt saliva fill her mouth. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a real meal. A proper meal with meat and vegetables and dessert. An idea started forming in her mind. A terrible, humiliating idea, but also maybe the only idea that could work. She could play that piano. She could play it better than almost anyone in the world. Her father had made sure of that. Hours and hours of practice every day since she was 5 years old. All that training had to be worth something, didn't it? What if she went in there and offered to play? What if she asked them to let her play the piano in exchange for a meal? It was a crazy idea, a desperate idea, the kind of idea that only comes when you haven't eaten in 2 days and you're out of options. Elena stood on the sidewalk for a long time, trying to gather courage. Her pride fought against her hunger. The old Elena, the one who lived in Manhattan and wore designer clothes, would never have even thought of doing something like this. But that Elena was gone. This Elena was hungry and desperate and out of choices. She thought about walking away. She thought about spending her last $10 on cheap food from a convenience store. But $10 wouldn't last long. And then what? She would be hungry again tomorrow. And the day after that. This cycle couldn't continue. Something had to change. The sun was almost down now. The restaurant was getting busier. More people were arriving for dinner. Elena watched them through the windows, laughing and talking, enjoying their evening. None of them knew what it felt like to go hungry. None of them had ever slept in a car or washed in a public bathroom. She took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was beating fast. She felt ashamed before she even walked through the door. But shame wouldn't fill her stomach. Pride wouldn't keep her alive. She had to do this. She had no choice. Elena crossed the parking lot. Each step felt heavy. Her legs didn't want to move forward. Everything in her wanted to turn around and run away. But she kept walking, one foot in front of the other, until she reached the front door of the Maestro. She pushed the door open. A wave of warm air hit her face, along with the smell of delicious food. The restaurant was beautiful inside. Soft lighting, quiet music playing from speakers, the sound of quiet conversations and clinking glasses. Everyone looked so comfortable, so at ease. And here she was, dirty and desperate and completely out of place. A young woman stood behind a wooden podium near the entrance. She wore a black dress and had her hair pulled back neatly. She was the hostess. She looked up when Elena entered, and Elena saw her expression change. The professional smile faded. Her eyes moved from Elena's face to her wrinkled clothes to her dirty shoes. The hostess knew immediately that Elena didn't belong here. Elena wanted to run. Every instinct told her to turn around and leave before she embarrassed herself. But her hunger was stronger than her fear. She walked toward the hostess podium on shaking legs. The hostess watched her approach with a look of confusion mixed with distaste. Elena opened her mouth to speak, but her throat felt dry. She swallowed and tried again. Her voice came out small and weak, barely above a whisper. "Excuse me," Elena said. "I have a question." The hostess didn't respond. She just stared, waiting. Elena could feel other people in the restaurant starting to notice her. Diners turning in their seats to look at this strange woman who clearly didn't belong. Elena forced herself to continue. She pointed toward the piano in the corner. "That piano," she said. "I was wondering, can I play it? In exchange for a meal?" The words hung in the air. For a moment, the hostess just stared at her like she couldn't believe what she had heard. Then her expression shifted from confusion to something close to disgust. "Excuse me?" the hostess said. "Are you serious?" Elena felt her face getting hot. She knew how she must look. Like a beggar. Like someone asking for charity. But she had already said it. She couldn't take it back now. "I can play," Elena said quickly. "I'm a good piano player. I need some food, please." The hostess shook her head slowly. She looked around the restaurant, checking if anyone else was seeing this. Then she leaned forward and lowered her voice. "This is a restaurant, not a homeless shelter," she said coldly. You need to leave, now. But Elena didn't move. She couldn't. If she left now, she had nothing. Nowhere to go. Nothing to eat. This was her only chance. Please, Elena said again. Just one song. Let me play one song and then I'll eat and leave, please. The hostess's mouth opened, probably to refuse again. But before she could speak, a man's voice interrupted. What's going on here? A middle-aged Asian man in a suit approached them. He looked professional and serious. This must be the manager. The hostess turned to him, looking relieved. Mr. Chen, she said. This woman just walked in and asked if she could play the piano in exchange for food. The manager, Mr. Chen, looked at Elena carefully. His eyes took in everything, her appearance, her desperation, her trembling hands. Elena could see him making his judgment. And she could see that judgment wasn't going to be in her favor. Robert Chen stood in front of Elena, studying her with careful eyes. He was the manager of the Maestro, and he had seen many things in his 15 years running this restaurant. But a homeless woman asking to play piano for food, that was new. Miss, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. This is a fine dining establishment. I know how it looks, Elena interrupted, her voice shaking. I know I don't look like I belong here, but I really can play. I'm not just some random person. I studied music. I'm actually really good. Robert Chen glanced at the piano in the corner. It had been his mother's idea to put a piano in the restaurant. She loved music, but they only had someone play on Friday and Saturday nights. The rest of the week it sat empty. Still, letting a stranger play, especially someone who looked like she hadn't showered in days, that was a risk he wasn't sure he wanted to take. Before he could respond, a loud voice cut through the restaurant. Oh, this is rich. Everyone turned. A woman in her 60s stood up from her table near the window. She wore an expensive cream-colored dress and pearls around her neck. Her hair was perfectly styled. Everything about her screamed wealth and privilege. Elena recognized the type immediately. The kind of woman who used to come to her father's concerts. The kind who donated money to museums and sat on charity boards. The woman walked toward them, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Her face showed amusement mixed with contempt. Other diners were watching now, some whispering to each other, others openly staring. Is this some kind of joke? The woman said, looking Elena up and down like she was examining a piece of garbage. A beggar wants to play piano? In this restaurant? Mrs. Whitmore, please, Robert Chen said, holding up his hand. Let me handle this. But Vanessa Whitmore wasn't finished. She circled around Elena, making a show of inspecting her. Elena felt her face burning with shame. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. Look at her, Mrs. Whitmore said to the other diners. Dirty clothes. Probably hasn't bathed in weeks. And she wants to touch the piano? That's a $15,000 instrument. Some people at nearby tables laughed. Others looked uncomfortable but didn't speak up. Elena's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She tried to keep her voice steady. I would be careful with it, she said quietly. I've played pianos worth much more than that. This made Mrs. Whitmore laugh even harder. Oh, you've played expensive pianos, she said mockingly. Of course you have. And I'm the Queen of England. More laughter from the tables. Elena felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she forced them back. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of these people. Mrs. Whitmore, that's enough, Robert Chen said more firmly. He looked genuinely uncomfortable now. This was getting out of hand. But another diner joined in. A man in a business suit at a corner table called out, She probably can't even read music. This is ridiculous. Someone should call the police, another woman added, before she steals something. The words hit Elena like physical blows. They thought she was a thief, a con artist, someone to be feared and removed. They couldn't see past her dirty clothes and tired face. They couldn't imagine that she might actually be telling the truth. Robert Chen held up both hands, trying to calm the situation. Everyone, please, he said loudly. There's no need for the police. Miss, I think it would be best if you let her play. The voice came from the back of the restaurant. It was quiet but clear. Everyone turned to look. An elderly Asian woman emerged from the doorway that led to the office. She was small and thin, maybe in her 70s, with gray hair pulled back in a bun. She wore simple clothes, a cardigan and slacks, and walked with a slight limp. Mom, Robert Chen said in surprise. What are you doing out here? The elderly woman ignored her son. She walked slowly toward Elena, looking directly at her face. Elena saw something different in this woman's eyes. Not judgment or contempt, something softer. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. I heard everything from the office, the old woman said. Her English had a strong accent. You want to play piano for food? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. The old woman, Robert's mother apparently, continued to study Elena's face. Then she looked at her hands. Elena's hands were dirty, nails unpolished, but the woman seemed to see something else there. What is your name? She asked. Elena, she answered quietly. Elena Petrov. You are a musician? I was, Elena said. I mean, I am. I studied piano since I was 5 years old. The old woman nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she suspected. Then she turned to her son and spoke in what Elena assumed was Mandarin. The conversation was quick and intense. Robert kept shaking his head, but his mother's voice got firmer. Finally, Robert threw up his hands in defeat. Fine, he said to his mother in English. Then he turned to Elena. His face was stern. One song. That's it. If you're terrible, you leave immediately. No food, no second chances. If you're decent, I'll give you a small plate from the kitchen. But you eat in the back, not out here with the guests. Understood? Elena nodded quickly. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. This is absurd, Mrs. Whitmore protested. Robert, you can't seriously. Mrs. Whitmore, Robert said, his patience clearly running out. This is my restaurant, and my mother rarely asks me for anything, so I'm doing this. He turned back to Elena and pointed toward the piano. Go ahead, one song. Make it quick. Elena walked toward the piano on shaking legs. Every eye in the restaurant was on her. She heard whispers following her across the room. I can't believe this is happening. She's going to be awful. I should film this. It'll be hilarious. Elena reached the piano and stood beside it for a moment. The beautiful black Steinway gleamed under the soft lights. She ran her hand along the smooth surface, and suddenly she was somewhere else. She was in her old apartment in Manhattan. Her father was sitting in his chair listening to her practice. The memory was so strong it almost broke her. She pulled out the bench and sat down. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands were shaking. She placed them on the keys and felt the familiar cool touch of ivory under her fingers. The restaurant fell silent. Even Mrs. Whitmore stopped talking. Everyone was watching, waiting for Elena to fail, waiting to laugh at her, waiting to see this homeless woman embarrass herself. Elena closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, and then she began to play. She chose Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. It was one of her father's favorite pieces. He had played it at her mother's funeral. He had taught her to play it when she was 12 years old. Music is not about the notes, he had told her. It's about the feeling behind the notes. It's about telling a story with your fingers. The first notes floated through the restaurant, soft and sweet. Elena's fingers moved across the keys like they had a life of their own. She didn't have to think about what to play. The music just flowed through her the way it always had. The melody was beautiful and sad, filled with longing and loss. She played with her eyes closed, forgetting where she was. Forgetting the people watching. Forgetting everything except the music. This was the only thing she had left from her old life. The only thing that hadn't been taken away. Her ability to create beauty with her hands. Her father's gift to her. The notes rose and fell like waves, sometimes loud and passionate, sometimes barely a whisper. Every phrase breathed with emotion. With pain and hope and memory, Elena poured everything into the music. All her grief about losing her father, all her fear about being alone, all her desperation and hunger and shame. It all came out through her fingers, transforming into something beautiful. The laughter had stopped. The whispers had stopped. The entire restaurant was frozen, listening. Even the waiters stood still, holding their trays. Mrs. Whitmore's smug smile had vanished from her face. She stared at Elena with her mouth slightly open, looking like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. The man who had said Elena probably couldn't read music sat very still, his fork halfway to his mouth, forgotten. Robert Chen stood behind the hostess podium with his phone in his hand, recording. His expression had changed completely. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something like awe. His mother, the elderly woman who had insisted they let Elena play, had tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. She stood with her hands clasped together, listening like she was in church, The music built to its gentle climax, then slowly faded. The final notes hung in the air like morning mist, soft and delicate. Then silence. Complete absolute silence. Elena kept her eyes closed for a few seconds after the music ended. She was afraid to open them. Afraid to see the reactions on people's faces. Afraid that maybe it hadn't been as good as it felt. When you're hungry and exhausted, your mind can play tricks on you. But then she heard it. One person started clapping. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant was applauding. Elena opened her eyes in surprise. People were standing up from their tables. Some were clapping loudly. Others had tears in their eyes. Elena's own tears finally broke free. They ran down her cheeks as she sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed. She had forgotten what this felt like. The connection between performer and audience. The way music could touch people's hearts. She had forgotten that she was good at this. That she had something valuable to offer the world even if she had nothing else. Robert Chen was the first to reach her. His face had completely transformed. The suspicious, stern manager was gone. Now he looked amazed and slightly embarrassed. He started, then stopped. He seemed to be searching for words. I apologize. I had no idea. That was extraordinary. Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you, she whispered. His mother came next, moving slowly but purposefully. She reached out and took both of Elena's hands in hers. The old woman's hands were small and warm. She looked into Elena's eyes with such kindness that Elena almost started crying again. You have gift, the old woman said softly. Special gift, I know. I played piano in China many years ago. Not like you. You are different. You are artist. Thank you, Elena said again. She didn't know what else to say. Other diners started approaching. Most looked embarrassed, especially those who had laughed at her earlier. One by one, they congratulated her on the performance. Even Mrs. Whitmore came over, though she looked like she had swallowed something sour. Well, Mrs. Whitmore said stiffly. That was quite impressive. I may have been too quick to judge. It wasn't really an apology, but it was something. Elena just nodded, too tired to say anything. But then an elderly man stood up from a corner booth.
He had been sitting alone and Elena hadn't noticed him before.
He was probably in his 80s with white hair and glasses. He wore a brown cardigan over a white shirt. He walked toward Elena slowly, using a cane. His face looked pale, almost shocked. Everyone stepped back to let him through. There was something about the way he moved, something in his expression that commanded respect. The old man stopped in front of Elena and stared at her for a long moment. His eyes were watery behind his glasses. What is your name? He asked. His voice had a slight German accent. Elena Petrov, she answered. The old man's face went even paler. He reached out and gripped the edge of the piano as if he needed support to stay standing. Petrov, he repeated. Victor Petrov's daughter. Elena felt her heart skip. You knew my father? Knew him? The old man let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. I attended 12 of his concerts. I heard him play in Vienna in 1998, in Boston in 2003, in New York more times than I can count. Victor Petrov was one of the greatest pianists of our generation. He studied Elena's face carefully. You have his touch, his sensitivity. But there's something more, something deeper. You play with even more emotion than he did. Who are you? Elena asked. My name is Marcus Friedman, the old man said. Professor Marcus Friedman. I taught at the New England Conservatory for 40 years before I retired. I trained concert pianists. I've heard thousands of performances in my life. And what you just played? He shook his head. That was one of the most moving performances I've ever witnessed. People around them had pulled out their phones. Some were searching something. Elena saw a few screens showing news articles. She knew what they were finding. Stories about her father's death. Stories about the debt and the scandal. Maybe even stories about how his daughter had disappeared afterward. A younger woman, maybe in her 30s, gasped as she read her phone screen. Oh my God, she said loudly. Victor Petrov died 6 months ago. It says here his daughter Elena went missing after his estate collapsed. There was a whole investigation. People thought something bad happened to her. More whispers spread through the restaurant. People looked at Elena with new understanding. The dirty clothes and desperate appearance suddenly made sense. Mrs. Whitmore had gone completely red in the face. She looked mortified. Oh dear, she muttered. Oh dear, I had no idea. Professor Friedman still held onto the piano, still staring at Elena like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "What happened to you?" he asked gently. "How did you end up here like this?" Elena's throat felt tight. She didn't want to talk about it. Not here, not in front of all these people. But something about Professor Friedman's kind eyes made her want to answer. "Everything was gone," she said simply. "My father left debts. They took the apartment. The piano, everything. I had nowhere to go, no money. I just started driving and ended up here." "And you've been living in your car?" Robert Chen asked. He looked horrified. Elena nodded. Robert's mother said something in Mandarin to her son. He nodded and turned back to Elena. "You'll eat here tonight," Robert said firmly. "A proper meal. Not a small plate from the kitchen. Whatever you want from the menu. And you'll sit at a proper table. And tomorrow," Professor Friedman added, "you and I need to talk. I have connections. People who can help. People who would do anything to support a talent like yours." Elena felt dizzy. Everything was happening too fast. 5 minutes ago, she had been the homeless woman they wanted to throw out. Now they were treating her like someone important. It didn't feel real. Robert's mother took Elena's arm gently. "Come," she said. "You sit, you eat. We talk later." She led Elena to the best table in the restaurant, right by the window with a view of the harbor. The sunset was painting the water orange and pink. It was beautiful. Elena sat down in the comfortable chair and suddenly felt how exhausted she was. How long she had been running on empty. Robert brought her a menu, but Elena couldn't focus on the words. Everything was blurring together. Robert's mother seemed to notice. "I order for you," she said kindly. She spoke to a waiter in rapid Mandarin. He nodded and hurried away. Professor Friedman had returned to his table to get his phone. He came back and sat down across from Elena. "May I join you?" he asked. Elena nodded. She was too overwhelmed to speak. The professor made several phone calls while they waited for the food. He spoke to someone named David about a scholarship foundation. He called someone else named Catherine, who apparently worked with young musicians. Each conversation was urgent and passionate. "You need to hear her play," he kept saying. "No, you don't understand. She's extraordinary." "Yes, Viktor Petrov's daughter?" "Yes, I'm serious." Elena just sat and listened, feeling like she was in a dream. This morning she had woken up in her car with no food and no hope. Now this was happening. It was too much to process. The food arrived. So much food. Bread and butter. A salad with fresh vegetables. Grilled salmon with roasted potatoes and asparagus. Elena stared at it. "Eat," Robert's mother encouraged. "Slow, don't make sick." Elena picked up her fork. Her hand was shaking. She took a small bite of the salmon. It was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. Or maybe it just tasted that way because she was so hungry. She tried to eat slowly like Mrs. Chen had said, but it was hard. She wanted to devour everything on the plate. Robert came by to check on her. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Elena nodded, unable to speak with her mouth full. "I'm sorry," Robert said quietly, "for how I treated you when you first came in. I should have given you a chance from the beginning." Elena swallowed. "You didn't know, still," he said. "My mother was right to insist. She usually is. She has good instincts about people." Mrs. Chen smiled at her son and patted his arm. Professor Friedman finished his phone calls and put his phone down on the table. He looked excited. "I've made some progress already," he said. "I spoke to the director of a music foundation. They provide support for talented musicians who are facing financial hardship. They want to meet you. They're interested in offering you a scholarship." "A scholarship?" Elena repeated. "For your education, your training, whatever you need to continue developing your gift. This is what the foundation exists for, to make sure talented people like you don't fall through the cracks." Elena felt tears coming again. "I don't understand why you're all being so kind to me." Professor Friedman reached across the table and patted her hand. "Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted. Because your father was a great man who gave joy to thousands of people through his music. And because you deserve a chance to do the same. That's what art is for, Elena, to be shared, to connect people, to make the world a little more beautiful." Robert's mother nodded in agreement. "And also," she added with a gentle smile, "because I know what it feels like to have nothing. I came to America 50 years ago with $5 in my pocket. No English, No family, nothing. People helped me. Now I help you. That is how it should be. Elena had finished eating about half the food on her plate when her stomach started to feel too full. She hadn't eaten this much in weeks. Her body wasn't used to it anymore. Mrs. Chen noticed and nodded approvingly. Good, she said. You stop when full. We save rest for later. You take home. Home. The word sounded strange to Elena. She didn't have a home. She had a car. But she didn't correct Mrs. Chen. The old woman was being so kind. More people came to the table to speak to Elena. Word had spread through the restaurant about who she was. Several people apologized for their earlier behavior. Others asked if she would play again. One woman asked if she could take a photo with Elena. It was overwhelming. Through it all, Professor Friedman sat quietly, watching Elena with thoughtful eyes. Finally, when the crowd thinned out, he leaned forward. Tell me about your plans, Elena, he said, before everything fell apart. What did you want to do with your music? Elena looked down at her half-finished meal. I was supposed to go to Juilliard, she said softly. I had been accepted. I was going to start in September. But the money my father said he had saved for it didn't exist, so I couldn't go. Juilliard, the professor repeated. Did you audition? Yes, last year. And they accepted you? Elena nodded. They said I was one of the most talented applicants they had seen in years. But without money for tuition, it doesn't matter how talented you are. Professor Friedman pulled out his phone again. What's your email address? Elena told him the email address she had created on her phone. She checked it sometimes at the library when she could use their internet. The professor typed something quickly and hit send. I just emailed you some contact information, he said. Tomorrow I want you to call these people. The first one is Helen Rodriguez. She runs the Hoffman Foundation for Young Musicians. They provide full scholarships, including living expenses. The second is David Chen, no relation to Robert, who is an estate attorney. I told him about your situation. He's willing to look into your father's estate matters pro bono. That means for free. Elena stared at him. Why would he do that? Because things don't add up, the professor said. Viktor Petrov was one of the highest-paid concert pianists in the world. Even with expensive tastes, there should have been something left. David thinks there may have been mismanagement or fraud involved. It's worth investigating. Elena hadn't thought about that. She had just assumed her father had been bad with money. But what if there was more to the story? What if someone had taken advantage of him? I don't know what to say, Elena whispered. Say you'll call them, Professor Friedman replied. Say you'll let people help you. You have a gift, Elena. The world needs to hear you play. We can't let that gift be wasted because of financial problems. Robert appeared at the table with a cardboard box. Inside was the rest of Elena's meal, carefully packed along with several other containers. There's breakfast in there too, he said. And lunch for tomorrow. My mother insisted. Mrs. Chen smiled. You come back tomorrow night. You play again. We pay you. Pay me? Elena repeated. Yes, you are a musician. Musicians get paid. Not food, money, real money. Robert nodded. My mother's right. We have a piano that sits empty most nights. If you're willing to play, I'll pay you $50 per night. You can play for 2 hours during dinner service. 3 nights a week to start. Maybe more if it goes well. $50 a night. 3 nights a week. That was $150. That was more money than Elena had seen in over a month. That was gas for her car. That was food. That was hope. Are you serious? She asked. Very serious, Robert said. After hearing you play, I think you'll be good for business. People will come just to hear you. And honestly, after the way I treated you earlier, it's the least I can do. Elena felt tears threatening again. She seemed to cry a lot these days. Thank you, she managed to say. Thank you so much. The professor stood up. I should get going. I'm staying at a hotel just down the street. Elena, please call those numbers tomorrow. And if you need anything at all, you have my number now too. Don't hesitate to call. He paused, then added, Your father would be very proud of you, not just for your playing, but for your strength, what you've survived these past months. It would have broken most people. But here you are, still making music. That takes courage. After the professor left, Mrs. Chen took Elena's hand. You have place to sleep tonight? She asked. Elena hesitated. She didn't want to admit she slept in her car. But lying seemed wrong after all their kindness. I have my car, she said quietly. Mrs. Chen frowned. She spoke to Robert in Mandarin. He nodded and disappeared into the back of the restaurant. When he returned, he had a set of keys. There's an apartment above the restaurant, Robert said. It's small, just one room with a bathroom and a tiny kitchen. We use it for storage mostly. But it has a bed, and it's empty. You can stay there tonight. I can't, Elena started. Yes, you can, Mrs. Chen interrupted firmly. You are a musician. You work for us now. We take care of our workers. You stay in apartment. Clean yourself. Sleep in real bed. Tomorrow we talk more about future. Elena took the keys with shaking hands. An apartment. A real apartment with a bed and a bathroom. It felt like a miracle. Robert walked her up the back stairs to the apartment. He was right that it was small. Just one room with boxes stacked along the walls, a narrow bed in the corner, and a door that led to a tiny bathroom and kitchenette. But to Elena it looked like a palace. I'll help you move the boxes out tomorrow, Robert said. And we'll get you some sheets and towels. For tonight there should be some old linens in that closet that are clean enough. Elena stood in the middle of the room, still holding the box of food. She couldn't quite believe this was happening. Robert, she said, why are you doing all this? You don't know me. He was quiet for a moment. My mother came to this country with nothing, he finally said. She worked 3 jobs. She cleaned houses. She washed dishes in restaurants. She saved every penny to open her own restaurant. When she finally did, other business owners in this town made it hard for her. They didn't want a Chinese restaurant here. They did everything they could to make her fail. He paused, but a few people helped her. People who saw past her accent and her broken English. People who gave her a chance when nobody else would. One of those people was an old music teacher named Mrs. Patterson. She didn't have much money, but she lent my mother $2,000 to help with the restaurant. She didn't ask for collateral. She didn't charge interest. She just helped. My mother never forgot that kindness. Robert looked at Elena directly. Mrs. Patterson died 5 years ago. But my mother always said she wanted to pay that kindness forward. To help someone else the way she was helped. Tonight, when she saw you, I think she saw herself 30 years ago. Desperate, talented, just needing a chance. So this isn't charity, Elena. This is paying forward an old debt. Elena felt the tears come again, but this time she didn't try to stop them. She let them flow down her face. I don't know how to thank you, she said. Play beautiful music, Robert said simply. That's all the thanks we need. After Robert left, Elena stood alone in the small apartment. She set the food box on a rickety table and looked around. It was dusty and full of boxes, but it was clean enough. And it was warm. And most importantly, it was safe. She went into the bathroom. There was a shower. A real shower with hot water. Elena turned it on and waited for it to warm up. She took off her dirty clothes and stepped under the spray. The hot water felt like heaven on her skin. She stood there for a long time, letting the water wash away weeks of dirt and fear and shame. She washed her hair 3 times, working out all the tangles. She scrubbed her skin until it turned pink. By the time she got out, the bathroom was full of steam, and she felt almost like a human being again. There was a cracked mirror above the sink. Elena wiped it clean and looked at herself. She still had dark circles under her eyes. She was too thin. Her cheekbones stood out sharply, but her eyes looked different. They looked alive again. They looked hopeful. She found the old linens in the closet Robert had mentioned. They smelled a bit musty but were clean. She made the bed and lay down. The mattress was old and lumpy, but after weeks of sleeping in a car, it felt like luxury. Elena pulled the thin blanket up to her chin and stared at the ceiling. Today had started like every other terrible day in the past month. Hungry, desperate, alone. But now she had food in her stomach. She had a place to sleep. She had people who wanted to help her. She had a job. And most importantly, she had played the piano again. She had remembered who she was. Not just Viktor Petrov's daughter. Not just a homeless woman. But Elena, a pianist. An artist. Someone with value. Someone with a gift to share. She thought about her father. She imagined him watching her from somewhere. She hoped he was proud. She hoped he knew she hadn't given up. Elena woke up to sunlight streaming through the small window of the apartment. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came back. The restaurant, the piano, the kindness of strangers. She sat up and looked around the dusty room. It hadn't been a dream. This was real. She checked her phone. It was 9 in the morning. She had slept for almost 12 hours straight. Her body had been so exhausted that it had simply shut down. She felt better than she had in weeks. Still tired, still a bit sore, but better. The box of food from last night sat on the table. Elena opened it and found the breakfast Robert had packed. Scrambled eggs, toast, and fruit. It was cold now, but she didn't care. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. After eating, she looked at the email Professor Friedman had sent her. There were 3 phone numbers and names: Helen Rodriguez from the Hoffman Foundation, David Chen, the attorney, and Professor Friedman's own number, with a note that said, "Call any time." "I mean it." Elena felt nervous about calling. What would she say? How did you ask strangers for help? But the professor had gone to all this trouble. The least she could do was try. She started with Helen Rodriguez. Her hands shook as she dialed. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered.
Hoffman Foundation, this is Helen. Hello, Elena said.
My name is Elena Petrov. Professor Marcus Friedman gave me your number. Elena! The woman's voice became warm immediately. Yes, Professor Friedman called me last night. I'm so glad you called. Can we meet today? I'd love to talk to you about the foundation and how we might be able to help. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop at 11. Helen gave her the address and said she was looking forward to it. The call with David Chen, the attorney, went similarly. He sounded professional but kind. He said he had already started looking into her father's estate and had found some concerning irregularities. He wanted to meet with her as soon as possible to go over the details. They set up a meeting for the next day. Elena felt dizzy. Things were moving so fast. Yesterday she had been sleeping in her car. Today she was setting up meetings with people who wanted to help her. It didn't seem real. There was a knock on the door. Elena opened it to find Mrs. Chen standing there with her arms full of towels, sheets, and clothes. "Good morning," the old woman said cheerfully. "You sleep well?" "Yes, thank you," Elena said, helping her carry things inside. Mrs. Chen set everything down and looked around the apartment. "Today we clean this place. Make it nice for you. Robert will move boxes. I bring more things you need." "You don't have to do all this," Elena protested. Mrs. Chen waved her hand dismissively. "Yes, I do. You work for us now. You need proper place to live. Also," she added with a smile, "I like you. You remind me of my daughter." "You have a daughter?" "Had," Mrs. Chen said softly. "She died. Long time ago. 20 years now. She would be your age. She loved music too." The old woman's eyes looked sad for a moment, then she smiled again. "Come, we have work to do." They spent the morning cleaning. Robert came up and carried out all the boxes. He brought a vacuum cleaner and helped clean the floors. Mrs. Chen washed the windows and wiped down all the surfaces. By the time they were finished, the apartment looked completely different. It was still small and simple, but it was clean and bright. Mrs. Chen had brought sheets and blankets, towels, and even some clothes. "These were my daughters," she explained. "I keep them all these years. Cannot let go. But now I think, maybe she would want you to have them. You need them more than closet needs them." The clothes were a bit old-fashioned but in good condition, and they were clean. Helena tried on a simple blue dress and it fit perfectly. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman looking back. Clean hair, clean clothes. She looked human again. At 10:30, Elena thanked Mrs. Chen and walked to the coffee shop to meet Helen Rodriguez. It was a beautiful day, sunny and warm. The town looked different in daylight, peaceful, pretty. Maybe this could be a good place to live after all. Helen Rodriguez was easy to spot. She had said she would be wearing a red jacket, and she was sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee already ordered. She was maybe 40 years old with dark hair and kind eyes. "Elena?" she asked as Elena approached. "Yes, thank you for meeting me." "Of course. Sit, please. I got you a coffee. I hope that's okay." They sat down and Helen pulled out a folder. "Professor Friedman told me about your situation, and I did some research on your father. I'm so sorry for your loss. Viktor Petrov was incredibly talented." "Thank you," Elena said quietly. "The Hoffman Foundation exists specifically to help young musicians who show exceptional promise but face financial barriers. We provide full scholarships, including tuition, housing, and living expenses. We also provide mentorship and career guidance." Helen opened the folder and showed Elena some papers. Based on what Professor Friedman told me about your playing, and based on your acceptance to Juilliard, I think you would be a perfect fit for our program. But I do need to hear you play myself. Would you be willing to audition? Yes, Elena said immediately. When? How about tomorrow? We have a practice space downtown. Just play whatever you'd like. I just need to hear you myself before I can officially offer you the scholarship. Tomorrow works, Elena said. Her heart was pounding. This could be her chance to go back to school, to continue her education, to have a future. They talked for another hour. Helen explained all the details of the scholarship. It covered everything. Not just school, but also food, housing, books, everything a student would need. All Elena had to do was pass the audition and maintain good grades. After Helen left, Elena walked back to the restaurant feeling like she was floating. When she arrived, Robert was setting up tables for lunch service. How did it go, he asked. Good, really good. I have an audition tomorrow. That's wonderful. My mother will be so happy to hear it. Elena helped Robert set tables, wanting to make herself useful. As they worked, Robert asked her about her father and her music training. She found herself talking more freely than she had in months. It felt good to talk about her father without feeling ashamed. Robert listened with genuine interest. That evening, Elena played piano during dinner service. She played for 2 hours, choosing pieces that fit the restaurant's atmosphere, soft, beautiful pieces that complemented the dining experience without overwhelming it. People stopped eating to listen. Several came up to compliment her afterward. Mrs. Whitmore was there again. She came to the piano after Elena finished and pressed a $100 bill into her hand. I behaved terribly last night, she said stiffly. This is my apology, and also a thank you for the beautiful music. Elena tried to refuse, but Mrs. Whitmore wouldn't take it back. Please, the older woman said. Let me do this. I said some cruel things I deeply regret. After the restaurant closed, Robert paid Elena $50 as promised. Combined with Mrs. Whitmore's $100, Elena had more money than she had seen in months. Real money that could buy gas and food and maybe some new clothes. The next morning, Elena dressed in one of Mrs. Chen's daughter's dresses and took a bus downtown to the practice space where Helen was waiting. It was a small music studio with a beautiful grand piano. Helen sat in a chair near the wall, ready to listen. Play whatever speaks to you, Helen said. I'm not looking for technical perfection. I'm listening for artistry, for soul. Elena sat at the piano and closed her eyes. She thought about everything she had been through. The loss, the fear, the hunger, the shame, but also the kindness, the second chances, the hope. She let all of it flow into her playing. She played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The first movement was soft and haunting. The third movement was fierce and passionate. She poured everything into it. When she finished, she opened her eyes. Helen was crying. Not sobbing, just tears running quietly down her face. That was remarkable, Helen said, wiping her eyes. Elena, I would be honored to offer you a full scholarship. You have a gift that the world needs to hear. Elena's own tears came then. Happy tears. Grateful tears. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. They discussed logistics. The scholarship would start immediately. Helen would help her apply to schools. Juilliard was still possible, but there were other excellent programs too. They would figure out the best path for Elena's career. After leaving the studio, Elena went to meet David Chen, the attorney. His office was in a professional building near the harbor. He was younger than she expected, maybe in his mid-30s, wearing a neat suit. Miss Petrov, he said, shaking her hand. Thank you for coming. Please sit down. He pulled out a thick folder of documents. I've been looking into your father's estate, and I have to tell you there are some serious problems with how things were handled. He explained that he had found evidence of mismanagement by the executor of the estate, Elena's stepmother, Maria. Large amounts of money had been transferred to Maria's personal accounts before debts were paid. Art and jewelry had been sold far below market value, with the difference possibly going to Maria. There were questionable expenses claimed against the estate. In short, David said, I believe your stepmother may have committed fraud. She had power of attorney for your father in his final months. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Elena settled into a routine that felt almost normal. She lived in the small apartment above the maestro. She played piano at the restaurant 4 nights a week. She practiced during the day, and She worked with Helen Rodriguez to prepare her applications for music schools. The lawsuit against her stepmother Maria was moving forward. David Chen had filed all the necessary papers. Maria's lawyers were fighting back hard, but David seemed confident. He told Elena that the evidence was strong. It would just take time. Word about Elena had spread beyond the restaurant. Local newspapers ran stories about her. Daughter of famous pianist makes music again after homelessness. The stories were sympathetic, and people responded. The restaurant started getting busier on nights when Elena played. People came from other towns just to hear her. Robert had to start taking reservations. Mrs. Chen beamed with pride, telling Elena that she was good for business. But Elena knew it was about more than business for Mrs. Chen. The old woman had essentially adopted her. She brought Elena food, fussed over her health, and shared stories about her late daughter. "You give me purpose again," Mrs. Chen told her one day. "After my daughter died, I just work and work, no joy. But now, I cook for you. I worry about you. I feel like mother again. This is gift you give me." Elena hugged her, grateful for this unexpected family she had found. Professor Friedman visited several times. He listened to Elena practice and gave her advice. He introduced her to other musicians in the area. He seemed to have made it his personal mission to help rebuild Elena's career. One evening, after Elena finished playing at the restaurant, a well-dressed couple approached her. The man was probably in his 50s, with gray at his temples. The woman was younger, elegant in a silk dress. "Excuse me, Miss Petrov," the man said. "My name is James Caldwell. This is my wife, Susan. We're from the Boston Symphony Orchestra's Board of Directors." Elena's heart skipped. The Boston Symphony Orchestra was one of the most prestigious orchestras in the country. "We heard about you from Professor Friedman," Susan Caldwell said. "And we came tonight to hear you play. You're extraordinary." "Thank you," Elena said, feeling suddenly shy. "We're organizing a benefit concert in December," James continued. "It's to raise money for music education programs in underprivileged schools. We usually feature established artists, but we like to include one or two emerging talents as well. We were wondering if you would be interested in performing." Elena couldn't speak for a moment. Perform with the Boston Symphony? In a benefit concert? It was the kind of opportunity most young pianists only dreamed about. "Yes," she finally managed. "I would be honored." They exchanged contact information and promised to send her the details. After they left, Elena sat down heavily at the piano bench. This was really happening. Her life was really changing. Mrs. Whitmore had become a regular at the restaurant. She came every week to hear Elena play. One night, she brought a friend, a woman who introduced herself as Margaret Fairfield, director of a prestigious arts foundation in New York. "Vanessa has told me all about you," Margaret said. "And after hearing you play tonight, I understand why she's so impressed. My foundation provides grants to young artists. I'd like to discuss a grant for you." The grant was for $10,000. It could be used for anything Elena needed: instruments, sheet music, concert clothes, living expenses. No strings attached, just financial support to help her focus on her art. Elena accepted gratefully. With the scholarship from the Hoffman Foundation, her regular pay from the restaurant, and now this grant, she was actually becoming financially stable. For the first time in months, she didn't worry about money every single day. One afternoon in October, David Chen called her with news about the lawsuit. "We got them," he said, excitement clear in his voice. "Maria's lawyers made a mistake. They submitted financial records that contradicted earlier statements. We now have proof that she moved money from your father's accounts into her own name before the estate was settled. The judge has agreed to expedite the case." "What does that mean?" Elena asked. "It means we might get a settlement much sooner than expected. Maria knows she's caught. Her lawyers are already talking about settling out of court. I think we can get you a significant amount of money back." "How much?" Elena asked, almost afraid to hope. "I can't promise anything yet, but I'm estimating somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000. After legal fees and taxes, you'd probably walk away with $200,000 to $300,000. Elena sat down. That much money would change everything. She could finish her education without worrying about scholarships. She could buy a car that actually worked. She could. She could have a life. 2 weeks later, David called again. Maria had agreed to settle. $420,000. After David's fees and taxes, Elena would receive approximately $280,000. Elena cried when she heard. Not from sadness this time, but from relief, from gratitude, from disbelief that things could actually work out. The money would take a few months to process, but just knowing it was coming made Elena feel secure. She could plan for the future now. She could dream again. In November, Elena auditioned for Juilliard again. This time she had the financial backing of the Hoffman Foundation. This time she knew exactly who she was and what she wanted to say through her music. She played Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It was one of the most difficult and emotional pieces in the classical piano repertoire. She played it with everything she had. All her pain, all her hope, all her love for music. The audition panel sat in silence for a long moment after she finished. Then one of them, a woman with white hair, spoke. "Ms. Petrov," she said, "that was one of the most moving auditions I've heard in my 30 years on this panel. Welcome back to Juilliard." Elena would start classes in January. She would have a dorm room. She would study with the best teachers in the world. She would have the education her father had wanted for her. But even with all these changes, Elena kept her commitment to the maestro. She played there twice a week, even after getting accepted to Juilliard. The restaurant had given her a chance when nobody else would. Mrs. Chen had treated her like a daughter. She wouldn't forget that. The benefit concert with the Boston Symphony Orchestra was scheduled for mid-December. It would be Elena's first major public performance since her father's death. She practiced for weeks, wanting everything to be perfect. Professor Friedman helped her prepare. He came to the restaurant several times a week to coach her. "You have the technique," he told her. "Now we work on your interpretation, on making the music speak to people's hearts." They worked on Beethoven's Emperor Concerto. It was a bold, triumphant piece, full of power and hope. It felt right for Elena's first major performance. It felt like a declaration that she was back, that she had survived, that she was stronger than ever. Mrs. Chen was so excited about the concert that she insisted on coming, even though it was a 2-hour drive to Boston. Robert said he would drive her. They were both so proud. 2 days before the concert, Elena received an unexpected visitor at the restaurant. A woman in her 30s with blonde hair walked in during the afternoon when the restaurant was closed. Elena was practicing at the piano. "Elena Petrov?" the woman asked. Elena stopped playing. "Yes?" "My name is Jennifer Mason. I'm a reporter for the Boston Globe. I'm writing a feature story about you for our Sunday magazine. Would you be willing to talk to me?" They sat at one of the restaurant tables and Jennifer asked questions, not just about the concert, but about everything. About her father's death, about being homeless, about how she ended up here, about the kindness of strangers. Elena answered honestly. She didn't hide anything. She told the truth about her stepmother's fraud, about sleeping in her car, about the moment she walked into this restaurant and asked to play for food, about the people who had helped her when she needed it most. "Why are you telling me all this?" Jennifer asked. "Most people would want to hide the difficult parts." Elena thought about it. "Because it's the truth," she said finally, "and because maybe my story can help someone else. Maybe there's someone out there who feels hopeless right now. Maybe they need to know that things can get better, that people are good, that help can come from unexpected places." The story ran 3 days later, the morning of the concert. It was the cover story of the Sunday magazine. There was a beautiful photo of Elena at the piano. The headline read, "From Homeless to Symphony Hall, Elena Petrov's Journey Back to Music." The article was long and detailed. It told her whole story. But it wasn't sad or pitying. It was hopeful. It was about resilience and kindness and the power of art to heal. Elena's phone rang all morning. Friends she hadn't heard from in months. Musicians her father had known. complete strangers calling to wish her well. It was overwhelming but also wonderful. That evening, Elena stood backstage at Symphony Hall in Boston. She wore a beautiful black gown that Mrs. Whitmore had insisted on buying for her. Her hair was professionally styled. She looked like a concert pianist again. She felt like one too. She could hear the audience taking their seats. The hall held over 2,000 people. The lights in Symphony Hall were bright and warm. Elena walked onto the stage and the sound of applause filled her ears. 2,000 people were clapping for her. She looked out at the audience and saw so many faces. Some she knew, most she didn't. But they were all here to listen to music. They were here to listen to her play. Elena sat at the beautiful grand piano. It was black and shiny, perfect in every way. She adjusted the bench and placed her hands on the keys. Behind her, the orchestra members sat ready with their instruments. The conductor stood with his baton raised, waiting for her signal. She took a deep breath. Then she nodded. The music began. Playing Beethoven's Emperor Concerto felt like flying. The piano and orchestra talked to each other like old friends. Sometimes the piano led with bold, powerful notes. Sometimes the orchestra swelled like ocean waves while the piano added delicate touches. Elena forgot about everything else. She forgot about the audience. She forgot about her difficult past. There was only the music flowing through her fingers. The first movement was strong and heroic. The second movement was soft and thoughtful. The third movement was full of joy, racing toward a brilliant ending. When the final note rang out, the hall fell silent for a moment. Then the audience exploded with applause. People stood up. They clapped and cheered. Some people were crying. Elena stood and bowed, feeling overwhelmed by their reaction. The conductor shook her hand warmly. The orchestra members tapped their bows on their music stands, showing their approval. Elena looked into the audience and found Mrs. Chen sitting in the third row. The old woman was standing and clapping with tears running down her wrinkled face. Robert stood next to her, smiling so wide. Professor Friedman had his hands pressed together, looking proud like a father watching his daughter. In that moment, Elena understood something important. The past 6 months had not just been about surviving. They had changed her completely. The old Elena who lived in luxury and took everything for granted was gone forever. This new Elena knew the value of kindness. She understood what it meant to be humble. She knew that talent without character meant nothing. Success without gratitude was empty. After the concert ended, there was a party in the lobby. Many people crowded around Elena. They wanted to meet her and shake her hand. Some had read the newspaper article about her story. Others just loved her playing. She smiled and thanked everyone, but she kept looking for the people who really mattered to her. She found Mrs. Chen sitting on a bench. The old woman looked tired but so happy. "You were wonderful," Mrs. Chen said, holding Elena's hands, like an angel making music. "I am so proud of you. I could not have done any of this without you," Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life." Mrs. Chen shook her head. No, you save yourself. I just give you piano and place to sleep. You do all the hard work." Robert hugged Elena tightly. "My mother has not stopped talking about you since we left Bellport. She keeps saying our Elena like you are her real daughter." "I feel like I am her daughter," Elena said honestly. Professor Friedman came over with several people. "Elena, these are some friends of mine, important people in the music world." He introduced her to famous musicians and teachers. They all wanted to talk about her future, about concerts she could perform, about opportunities waiting for her. Then a young man approached. He looked nervous. He was tall with dark hair and looked somehow familiar to Elena. "Miss Petrov," he said quietly. "I do not know if you remember me. My name is Andrew. Andrew Petrov. I am your cousin." Elena stared at him in shock. "Andrew? My cousin Andrew from California?" He nodded. "I saw your article in the Boston Globe newspaper. I did not know what happened to you after your father died. You just disappeared. Our whole family was worried. We did not know where you went." Andrew explained that he was her father's nephew. When Elena was younger, they had been close. But his parents divorced and his family lost contact with Victor's side of the family. He never knew about the money problems or about Elena being homeless. "I am so sorry," he said. "If I had known, I would have helped you. We are family." Elena hugged her cousin tightly. She had felt so alone in the world. But she was not alone. She had family. Andrew was family. But so were Mrs. Chen and Robert. Professor Friedman was family. Helen Rodriguez was family. All the people who helped her were her family now. 6 months passed. Elena stood in her small room at Juilliard packing a bag. It was summer vacation and she was going back to Bellport for a month. She would work at the Maestro restaurant like she promised. Even though she was a student at one of the best music schools in the world, she still played piano at the restaurant twice a week. Her first year at Juilliard had been amazing. She studied with the best teachers. She performed in student concerts. She made friends who loved music as much as she did. Her professors told her she had a bright future. The money from the lawsuit against her stepmother was safely in the bank. She used a little bit for living expenses but saved most of it. She did not need much money. The scholarship paid for her school. She had learned to live simply during those weeks when she had nothing at all. Elena did not speak to her stepmother Maria anymore. Maria had paid the settlement money but refused to talk to her. Elena was okay with that. She had forgiven Maria. Not because Maria deserved it, but because holding anger in her heart would only hurt herself. Forgiving Maria gave Elena peace. When Elena arrived in Bellport, Mrs. Chen greeted her like she had been gone for years instead of months. The old woman had cooked all of Elena's favorite foods. The small apartment above the restaurant was clean and ready, exactly as Elena had left it. That evening, Elena played piano at the Maestro. The restaurant was completely full. It was always full on nights when Elena played. People came from far away to hear the girl who played for food. Elena did not mind the attention. If her story helped people or made them happy, that was a good thing. During her break, a family came to speak with her. A mother, father, and their teenage daughter approached the piano. "We drove 2 hours to hear you tonight," the mother said. "We read about you in the newspaper. Your story gave us hope when we had none." "Hope?" Elena asked, curious. The father put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Our daughter Sarah is a musician too. She plays violin. She is very talented. But we are not rich people. We thought we could never afford to send her to music school. We thought her dream was impossible. But then we read about you," the mother continued, "about the scholarships and grants, about the people who helped you. We realized there were ways we did not know about. We contacted the Hoffman Foundation. They are going to help Sarah go to music school." The teenage girl looked at Elena with bright, hopeful eyes. "You made me believe my dream could come true," she said. "Thank you so much," Elena hugged the girl. "Never stop playing," she told her. "Never give up on your music. No matter what happens in life, keep playing." After the family left, Elena sat at the piano feeling deeply moved. This was why she had shared her story with the newspaper. This was why she kept playing at the Maestro even though she could earn more money playing elsewhere. Her story could help other people. Music was meant to be shared with everyone. One act of kindness could inspire many more acts of kindness. Mrs. Chen brought Elena a cup of hot tea and sat beside the piano. "You look very happy," the old woman said. Watching Elena's face, "I am happy," Elena said. "I really, truly am." "You think about your father often?" "Every single day," Elena admitted. "I used to feel angry at him. For spending all the money. For leaving me with nothing. But now I understand the truth. He gave me everything that really mattered. He gave me music. He taught me discipline. He showed me how to express feelings through art. That is worth more than all the money in the world," Mrs. Chen nodded wisely. "Material things come and go like water. But talent stays forever. Character stays forever. Love stays forever in the heart." Elena thought about the past year of her life. The lowest, darkest point had led to the most growth. Losing everything had taught her what truly mattered in life. Being homeless had shown her the importance of compassion and kindness. Asking for help had taught her to be humble. And accepting kindness from strangers had opened her heart in ways she never imagined possible. She remembered that night when she walked into this restaurant. She had been dirty and desperate, asking to play piano in exchange for food. She remembered the shame burning in her chest. The humiliation of being laughed at. But she also remembered the courage it took to ask for help. If she had not been brave enough to walk through that door, where would she be now? Sometimes the moments that feel like terrible endings are actually beautiful beginnings. Sometimes a person has to fall completely apart before they can rebuild themselves into someone stronger and better. Elena began playing again. She chose one of her father's favorite pieces, Debussy's Clair de Lune. The notes floated through the restaurant like moonlight shining on calm water. beautiful and peaceful and full of hope and promise. As she played, she looked around at all the people in the restaurant. They were enjoying their meals and conversations with family and friends. She saw Mrs. Chen serving food with a warm smile. She saw Robert talking kindly to customers. She saw ordinary people living ordinary lives. They did not know they were part of her miracle. But they were. This was a miracle. Not a dramatic lightning bolt miracle from the sky, but the quiet kind of miracle. The kind built slowly from small acts of kindness. One person giving a stranger a chance to prove themselves. One person offering food and shelter without asking for payment. One person making phone calls on behalf of someone they just met. All these small kindnesses had added up to save Elena's life and give her a future. Elena had learned something very important. No person succeeds completely alone. Everyone needs help sometimes. There's no shame in asking for help when you need it. The real shame is in not offering help when you are able to give it. In walking past someone who needs you. In letting pride stop you from extending your hand to someone who is falling. She had also learned that a person can lose absolutely everything and still survive. You can fall as low as it is possible to fall and still climb back up again. Being resilient does not mean never falling down. It means getting back up again when you do fall. The song ended. People in the restaurant applauded. Elena smiled at them and began playing another beautiful piece. She thought about what was still to come in her future. She would finish her education at Juilliard. She would become a concert pianist like her father before her. But she would also do something more. She had already started working with the Hoffman Foundation to help other young musicians in trouble. She wanted to be for others what Mrs. Chen and Professor Friedman had been for her. She wanted to pass the kindness forward to the next person who needed it. Elena had also started a special fund in her father's name, the Viktor Petrov Emergency Fund for Musicians. It gave small emergency grants to musicians facing sudden financial crisis. Enough money to buy food, to pay rent for a month, to keep going during the hardest times. She gave a portion of every performance fee to this fund. Several of her father's old colleagues and friends had donated money as well. Elena understood now that her father's real legacy was not his fame or his recordings. It was the love of music he inspired in other people. The joy he brought to audiences all over the world. The students he taught over the years. The beautiful tradition he passed down to his daughter. Now Elena was creating her own legacy, not just through her piano playing, but through her actions and choices, through her kindness to others, through her refusal to forget where she came from and who helped her when she was drowning. When the restaurant finally closed for the night, Elena helped Mrs. Chen clean the tables and sweep the floor. It was their routine every time Elena played. Mrs. Chen always protested, saying Elena was the performer and should not have to clean. But Elena always insisted on helping. It kept her humble and grounded. It reminded her that no honest work was beneath her dignity. All work had value and meaning. Later that night, Elena sat by the window in her small apartment. She looked out at the harbor below. The water sparkled beautifully under the moonlight. The town was quiet and peaceful. This place had become her real home in a way Manhattan never was. Here she was not Viktor Petrov's famous daughter. She was just Elena, and that was more than enough. She picked up her phone and looked at old photographs of her father. There was one picture of them together at one of his concerts. He had his arm around her shoulders. Both of them were smiling at the camera. She touched the screen gently with one finger. "I hope you are proud of me, Papa," she whispered into the quiet room. "I did not give up. I kept playing music, just like you taught me to do." She imagined she could hear his voice answering her. "Music is not about being perfect, Elenka. It is about truth. It is about expressing what lives in your heart. You are doing that now. You are living an honest, true life. I am so very proud of you." Elena smiled through her tears. Then she turned off the light and went to bed. Tomorrow she would wake up and practice her music for hours. She would help Mrs. Chen in the restaurant kitchen. She would play piano for the evening dinner guests. She would live her life one precious day at a time, feeling grateful for every single moment. The young woman who once asked desperately, "Can I play in exchange for food?" had found so much more than just a meal that night. She had found her true self. She had found her real purpose in life. She had found a loving family. She had found home in the most unexpected place. And every single time she sat down at a piano, she remembered everything. She remembered the hunger and the fear and the burning shame. but she also remembered the kindness and the hope and the final triumph. All of it had shaped her into who she was today. All of it had made her strong. Elena Petrov, daughter of a piano legend, had become a legend in her own right. Not because of fame or fortune or newspaper articles, but because of her resilience and grace and courage, because she kept creating beauty and sharing it with the world even when her own world seemed completely dark and hopeless. And that, she thought as sleep finally came, was the very best legacy anyone could leave behind.